And again, if you would like more information, please sign up, get some more information from either El Centro, KS Moda, AIR, ACLU, or some of these other organizations that are doing some amazing work around the municipal ID and safe and welcoming community. So thank you to everyone working on that. So I think we're going to, sure, all right. So I asked to sit up here with the panel because I've always wanted to host my own TV show, and this makes me feel like Stephen Colbert or somebody like that. So thanks, guys. And that wouldn't work out. I have a face for radio, is what I've always told. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We're really excited to share some information with all of you. As you know, this isn't anything new. Immigration policies and things that are happening in our community have been happening for a long time now. But we wanted to share some information. We have some great panelists that I'll introduce here in a minute, and to get their insight on what's happening and things that we should know and consider as we share other information within our community. We're really thankful to Nubia and to Air for the information that she presented just now. There's a lot to unpack there. That 20 minutes that she spent giving you information, you could really spread out into at least a day's worth of information, if not more. So I would encourage you to take what you heard tonight from Nubia and what you'll hear from our panelists, and to follow up, and to ask more questions, and to dig into more information, because you're not going to learn everything that you need to know tonight, whether it was in those 20 minutes or from tonight's panel. As amazing as they are, there's a lot to unpack with all this information. So please continue to ask questions, continue to dig into more information, and I'd encourage you to just keep asking and keep searching and keep speaking up on behalf of our community. So again, thank you. I want to welcome and introduce all of our panelists tonight. You can find their full bios in the event page for tonight. But you can see their beautiful faces up here and in your pamphlet. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to give them 2 minutes to just say who they are and maybe just give a quick reaction to either what you've heard tonight so far, what's been in the news. There's been a lot in the news, or if you just want to save it until I have some questions that we'll be asking. But I'll let them introduce themselves and just give a quick reaction. So we'll start to my right here.
Otra vez yo. Hi again. Nubia Steffes. I want to say I'm so thankful for you all being here. Whatever capacity is that you work, I'm so thankful that you're taking this step to learn more how to help our community, because it's very much needed. It's very much needed in every capacity. It's from school to school counselors. So I'm very thankful. I want to introduce myself. Yeah, that's it.
Hey, I'm Ginevra Alberti. I'm the attorney at the clinic at Sharma Crawford Attorneys at Law. We are a nonprofit located down in the Crossroads in Kansas City, Missouri. I do removal defense work, so I represent people who are in deportation or removal proceedings in the Kansas City Immigration Court. And my clients are in Kansas and Missouri. As long as they are in proceedings in the Kansas City court, then I can, we represent them as long as they meet our income criteria, because we are a nonprofit. And I would echo what Nubia said. I think it's great that you guys are all here. I know I have a lot of clients whose, are either kids or their families have kids who are in the school systems, and they're all very confused. And I have a lot of clients that need therapy for whatever reason, whether it's because of domestic violence or they are asylum seekers that have other sorts of trauma. But it's great to see you all here, especially, in this climate. As Nubia said, we've seen a huge increase in just general fear, and I think that also kind of overflows into families needing more help with mental health care and things like that too. So thank you guys for being here.
Make sure this is working. Good evening. I'm very excited to be here amongst other social workers and social service providers, with myself being a social worker working in the mental health field. Thank you all for being here to learn information, because as you guys all know, these are many questions that are impacting our families, and when we're trying to look at it from a trauma-informed care perspective. We have kids that are asking questions that know their parents or other family members' status in their household, and we need to have the up-to-date, correct, accurate information to share with our families. So thank you. I also, in my full-time job, work with our behavioral health team at Vibrant Health, but then I also am fortunate enough to work with a group that's called Communities Concerned for Immigrants and Refugees. And I would encourage you to, there's a sign up in the back that if you are interested in being a part of our forum, where we have different boards where we can share information that is specific to working with immigrants and refugees, we would love to have you as a part of that forum. So again, thank you all for your time.
Good evening. My name is Raymond Rico. I am an attorney at the Garcia Immigration Law Firm. I see Ginevra diligently representing her clients usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm also a volunteer attorney with the Kansas-Missouri Dream Alliance, and it's an honor to be here. I see a lot of new faces, and that's a great thing. I believe we can have a mutually beneficial conversation and dialogue today, because the more we can inform each other, the better we can represent the immigrant community outside of these doors. And look forward, hopefully you have questions in the basket, and hopefully we can learn a lot from each other today.
Thank you all very much. Again, thank you all for being with us tonight. So we gave you a set of questions just to kind of prep you, and I'm going to try to stick to the script as much as possible. But, you know, we've got a lot of educators, we've got some social workers, we've got folks representing different organizations in our community. With all the fear and all of the policies, issues that are happening in the immigration realm, a question that has come up often is, what steps can organizations take to make their organization, their school, their location a safe place and protect against ICE or immigration, or however that comes up? So what can organizations and folks do to make their organizations a safe place?
Okay. One thing I would suggest is that organizations make like an organization-wide plan, so that everybody knows what what you would do in this situation in case it does come up. You don't have to scramble to talk about it then. And one thing I would say is, if you work in an organization where you're providing therapy or mental health services to people, is if immigration shows up, if you're in private property, you're not out in a public space in the parking lot, immigration shows up and says, I want to know about this person, you say, do you have a HIPAA waiver? Because if not, bye. And if they say, well, we need to come in because we think someone we need is there right now, then you say, do you have a judicial search warrant? If not, bye. And the same thing with schools. If you have an ICE officer coming into the building and saying, we need to know about this child, you say, are you on the list of like trusted people? Because if not helping you. And again, judicial search warrants. If someone is coming in and saying they need to search for someone or for something, they need to show you a warrant not signed by another ICE officer. They have these BS warrants that they run around with and hand to people, but actually like a warrant signed by a judge. Otherwise, bye.
I would just add that from a social service perspective, making sure, I would agree with everything that you just said, making sure that your frontline individuals they know what the process is, because most likely those are going to be the individuals that are going to have the first contact with those agents. And they need to be able to feel like they know how to respond. Many of us get very nervous when we see somebody in uniform or when somebody flashes a badge. So I would encourage to even just do some walkthroughs with staff on what would you do and play it out in those different scenarios. Making sure that you know what is a private space, what's a public space, those kinds of things. So really making sure that as a staff, you guys are walking through what is your protocol and have it written out, and make sure that with new staff that come on board, that they're up to date on the information on what to do, and that they realize all of the HIPAA and FERPA laws as well.
I would also add that let your client, let your patients know that you have this. The more the information is given to them, the more at peace they'll feel, like that is a place. You could have this policy, but if they don't know right? You need to make sure they know that it's a safe place, that you have these policies, that you're trained, and that if something comes, you are willing to, right? You're going to jump and put this policy into actions.
Thank you. And just to follow up with that question, if, and I think Ginevra kind of touched on this already a little bit, but if ICE does come looking for a client with a warrant, what is the organization required to do when that does happen?
I'll start, and I would echo what Nubia, Ginevra, and Andrea said about having a plan. It's hardly ever the case where the CEO or principal or ED of the organization is the front person. But this is really key for those who are up front to know what the policy is at the location. If somebody has a judicial warrant for the arrest of someone and it has all the FERPA or HIPAA requirements met, then and it's signed by a judge, not by ICE, then there is a valid judicially signed basis where probable cause has already been determined to make an arrest of somebody that fits the description of the warrant. It has to have a lot of things, and there's whole trainings that need to be done about what is a valid warrant, what is not a valid warrant. Probably the main thing that I would say first is delay is not obstruction. Delay is making sure that protocols are followed. If there is a warrant for somebody within the building, if the person's not there, guess what? That's your out there. That person's not here. Or that person, if they're in a hospital, they left this morning. If that's the case, then they're trespassing if they don't leave upon your request when that warrant is not executable. There's a thing that you may have heard, the word that is used is collateral. If it's at a business or at a hospital, at a school, at a nonprofit, if ICE shows up with a warrant, one thing that they're doing is that they're using that warrant for one person to arrest dozens and dozens of people. And they call it collateral, and that's one thing that I would say that needs to be understood as well. If there is a warrant for one person and there's maybe an intercom system or some way that you can isolate somebody that is to be arrested under a valid warrant, we want to avoid anybody else being a part of any warrant. Sometimes opening the door to your business I won't say sometimes, every time that you open your door and you have a private space, that is giving your consent for them to show up. And so a lot of people are conditioned to respect authority and to open the doors and to say, hey, they're the good guys. Whatever it is that they're going to do, this is part of their official business. But we have to be the gatekeepers. We have to be the protectors of people that are within those doors to know what the rights are, what is a warrant, the extent of that warrant, who can be arrested on the basis of that warrant, and really try to close in on having this be disruptive and that could impact many, many more families.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to switch just a little bit. There are several questions from the audience so far, and one that's scripted anyway, so I'll jump to that one. I'm going to do kind of a three-part question. There are several questions regarding public charge, so I'm wondering if maybe someone can give us a quick overview of what the public charge rule means. What does it mean? What are the latest updates, perhaps, is another piece to this question. And yeah, I'll start with those two, and then I've got a couple of questions that have come up. So.
Okay, so when someone is a public charge, there's a test that's applied to whether someone's a public charge. So it's a test that's applied only to certain people who are trying to immigrate into the United States or to enter the United States on certain types of visas. And the test, so for example, someone who is trying to get a green card or permanent residency based off their marriage to a U.S. citizen or based off their 21 or older U.S. citizen child, they will be subjected to this public charge test. And it's basically a test to determine if you are inadmissible to the United States because you are going, or you are more likely than not to become a public charge if you are allowed into the United States. And what they mean by public charge is basically that you're going to be reliant on certain types of public benefits. As of right now, they define someone as a public charge if they believe they will be primarily dependent on government assistance, so like, more than 50% reliant, right? However, this new rule that just came down, it has not taken effect yet. There's a new rule that came down few days ago that will be effective October 15th, 2019. And when it takes effect, it's changing the definition of a public charge to somebody who receives one of a specified list of public benefits for more than 12 aggregate months in any 36-month period. And if you receive more than one public benefit in one given month, they count that as you receiving public benefit for 2 months, which makes no sense, but okay. I think what they're saying is that it's going to start the 36-month period. They can't look back more than 36 months prior to the date that you filed this application that makes you subject to the public charge test. But they can also kind of look forward. If they can also look to see, do they think it's more likely than not that you'll become one in the future, even if you haven't been one in the past. So they've created this whole like weird system that doesn't probably have a lot of guidance involved, where the adjudicator looking at this has a lot of discretion to say, yeah, I think you're going to be one or not. But one thing that it's important to know is that, first of all, it still only applies, this public charge test only applies to people who are applying for certain types of benefits, like permanent residency based on marriage to a citizen, or based on their mother or child applying for them, or for other limited types of visas to come back into the United States or to enter the United States. It can be applied to people who are already in the United States who are trying to become permanent residents, as well as people who are outside. But it doesn't apply to people who have DACA, for example. They don't have to prove they're not a public charge to renew their DACA, or if they're applying for a U visa, or for trafficking visa, or certain other humanitarian-based types of visas, or if they're refugee or asylee. They don't have to worry about the public charge test. And so that's important to keep in mind. And also, people who have no status in the United States, or who are undocumented, who aren't going to be applying for anything at all, I mean, this isn't really applied to them. But the other thing that's important to know is that a lot of times people aren't even eligible. If they're undocumented, they're not even eligible to apply for a lot of these public benefits that would disqualify them based on the public charge thing anyway. And just because you have kids who are receiving food stamps or SSI or something like that, that will not make you a public charge. It has to be you personally receiving, or they think you are going to receive these benefits in the future. So if you have people telling you, oh, I'm taking my US citizen child off Medicaid or off of food stamps because of the whole public charge thing, tell them no, because it's not a relevant consideration to their case. And I can go on and on, but I'll let somebody else talk about this for a minute.
Thank you, Ginevra. And first, an overbroad political view is that cruelty is the point of this policy. The goal here is to have less people receiving benefits that people are eligible for, and to have confusion, and confusion leads to people just being overly fearful and deciding that we're not going to do things like have our kids receive free or reduced lunch at schools, when that's not even part of the new public charge rule that's about to come about. So they want less people receiving benefits that are eligible for them, and they want less people being able to legalize their immigration status as a result of this public charge rule. One of the cruel areas that will be looked at are negative factors, heavily negatively weighted factors, such as having received these benefits for over 12 months over the last 36. They're going to be looking at age. So if you're young and not working, or old and either too old to work, or you have a medical condition where you can't work, you're not fully able-bodied, or one of them is going to be English language skills or educational skills, or education and skills, so they're separate things. Those that are low income, those who don't have wealth. Right now, one of the ways that becomes a heavily positive factor is if you make 250% of the poverty level. For a family of four, that's $64,000 per year. And so we're going to have to start evaluating, what does this mean for children that are petitioning for their parents that are over 60, 61 years of age, or those who can't work, or parents petitioning for children that are too young to work. And so the policy now becomes a crystal ball. It's going to be future perspective, looking at who might be someone who would potentially request government benefits in the future, and then that becomes a determination as to who can legalize their immigration status. And so it's a very, very bad policy. I'll echo again what Ginevra said, that most of these programs today, undocumented immigrants are not eligible for, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to get people off of programs that they are eligible for, to get people who have family members, who again, family members should not be the determinative factor to determine whether somebody is a public charge. If someone's child is receiving these benefits, it won't impact the parent. And so that's going to be one of the main points of confusion that will lead many people to say, we better get off of these programs, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to legalize our status. So there's going to be a lot of myths right now. It hasn't been implemented yet, and so when we're on the ground and seeing how this impacts real people, real families, we'll be able to test the waters and be able to inform you even more as to how cruel or how deep this policy is going to go in the immigrant community. Right now, this program has already started for those who are applying for immigrant visas to come in. In our office, we've seen that impact a few individuals. We can usually supplement applications to provide more information that can get over a determination that somebody is a public charge, and so we're thinking that'll be the case as well here locally, but you can be denied if they make a ruling that you are a public charge.
So I'm actually going to direct a question to Andrea regarding this as well, so you might want to add. Just really quickly, I was a part of a conversation, and actually Raymond and Andrea were both there a week and a half ago or so, where a local organization was sharing that there's a lot of fear around, and I think to Raymond's point about the cruelty of this public charge piece, where they saw a drop-off in SNAP food stamp applications. From one year, they had over 2,000 applicants, to the next year they had less than 800 applicants, all who were still eligible to apply for SNAP food stamps, but just for that fear told them, no, I won't apply. Andrea, being at the clinic at Vibrant Health, working with individuals and families, and I know you guys also do SNAP enrollment there and other benefits. What have you seen, or what else could you add to the piece about public charge?
Perfect. Thank you, Randy. I was just going to share that same example. And then that same meeting, there was an individual there that worked for one of the Medicaid companies, and again, just reiterated that they have seen a drop-off in applicants for Medicaid services, which is sad because that sets us back years and years from the work that we have been trying to do in the social service arena of making sure that every individual that lives in our communities have access to healthy food and quality health care. And so that is really worrisome. But also the fact that this public charge is aimed to the immigrant families, that many of them are in mixed status families, this is going to have a ripple effect for everyone, because once families start dropping from Medicaid or food stamps, the SNAP program, that then means, for example, at Vibrant Health, we are a federally qualified health center. So we receive federal dollars to serve both the insured and the uninsured. And the more individuals that are insured help us to then be able to serve that are uninsured. So if we start seeing more families that are uninsured and they don't need to be, that means that we're going to have to cut back on our doctors, on our nurses, on our medical assistants, our front office team, our behavioral health workers, and then that's going to then trickle down to the larger community, and that's not just for federally qualified health centers. That's going to be in many of the organizations that we work with, because there's going to be less funding in order to fund some of our very own positions that we have here with us tonight. So just add that piece in there.
So I mentioned that there were several questions regarding the public charge piece. At the core of most of the ones I read, what can we do? What can individuals, advocates, social workers, everyday people do to learn more, to educate folks, to advocate, speak up for? What can we do? What would you say?
Well, I think one thing is just for now is encourage people when you are seeing them that, talk to them about what's going on with their family, and if you see that they are trying to drop out of programs that family members who are legally able to participate in, tell them stop that, because if it's a U.S. citizen child or your spouse who's a citizen, I mean, they should be getting the care they need. There may be issues if your spouse is a citizen and is petitioning for you, and then they look into whether you're a public charge. If they think your spouse might be a public charge, then you might have to get a joint sponsor, but that's getting a little bit more complicated than I think we need to keep it right now. But I think it's just educating people as much as possible that the whole public charge thing is only about the non-citizen, really, not about their family members. And again, not every non-citizen has to really worry about the public charge thing because it doesn't apply to every single person who's trying to get status in the United States. And I think the other thing too is to keep looking for more opportunities to become more educated on what this really means, because as time goes by, we're going to be learning more and more about how the whole system the system works, and also what the effect is on the community. And so, I would say stay tuned. There's the Immigrant Legal Resource Committee Center, ILRC. They have some resources online that talk about what the public charge rule is and who it does and does not affect. I will say they are located in California, so some of their stuff is kind of specific to California, but it's still a helpful resource to look at. And they are going to continue updating their website as things change. So there are good places that you can look, and you can always call us or somebody else in the community, and we can point you to resources.
I mean, what can we do on an individual level? I would say, and it's not because I'm an attorney, but I would say just get expert advice as to what the potential options are. Even today at 3 p.m., I met with a family who the gentleman is 41 years old, is going to have a child turn 21 next year. And so we spent most of the consultation today talking about the public charge rule. And so we have a 41-year-old male with no health conditions whatsoever, and he's fearful that he says, I need to apply before October 15th because that's when the rule comes into effect. And so I'm sitting here with what little I know about the gentleman. I met him today, and I was just trying to convince him that, yes, let's get this in before October 15th, but don't live in fear. We're going to evaluate every case on an individual one-to-one basis and literally walk people through the system, go with people to their interviews and to be able to advocate on somebody's behalf. But for this gentleman, in all likelihood, will never be deemed a public charge by the government, but they're scared. This gentleman was scared, thinking that my chance to legalize when my child turns 21 is now being taken from me. So that's the immigration context. For many of you, it's going to be about benefits. It's going to be about you should continue receiving these benefits because it's your child, it's your spouse, they're eligible, and man, especially if somebody is undocumented without a clear path to being able to legalize, we should be telling those folks that, hey, if you have family that's eligible and there's nothing on the radar to be able to legalize based on a family member or to do adjustment of status at this time, that you should continue receiving those benefits. Some of those are vital for sustaining life. So individual expertise, the hope is that this is going to be delayed through the lawsuits, hopefully through and past 2020, and that this was not something passed by Congress. This was DHS deciding that they're going to define more thoroughly what it means to be a public charge, and they're adding in all of these bad things despite tens of thousands of letters and comments to the contrary, asking them not to implement these changes.
I would just add, have those resources in their language. Have that ILRC info sheet in their language. Follow organizations that have that, because you could tell them this. Well, they'll go home and they'll see the news and they'll start panic. Give them that information so our community could be educated in what's going on. Tell them this is ongoing. Share that information with them, but also give them resources and papers so they could take it home and read it, or just be confident, like, okay, this is what this says. This was updated on this date, and that information is available if you follow groups like the ILRC, United with Dream, other groups, advocacy groups.
Perfect. Just one more thing. Sorry. I would definitely echo what everybody has said here. But in addition to that, for many of us in the room who are going to be the initial connectors when working with some of these families and hearing the stories, to make sure that we are giving them, yes, resources, but reputable resources. There are many, many immigration attorneys in our community, and every one of them mean well. Unfortunately, just like within every profession, social workers, every profession, there are individuals out there that aren't necessarily sharing the most accurate information and almost kind of helping to create more of an environment of fear. So I would just urge you guys to please keep resources that are near and dear to you that you know are reputable, because we also don't want to send our families to resources that are going to share the wrong information or just increase their level of fear.
Great, thank you so much. So we still have a ton of questions, and I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time. I don't know that we'll get through all of your questions, so I apologize ahead of time and try to get through some more. There are a few that are asking around some of the recent events. You know, Nubia touched on a few things that are happening in our own community. There was a couple of questions that ask around these Know Your Rights resources that we have. There are a ton of Know Your Rights resources and workshops that are happening in our community, but as we've witnessed in our own community, sometimes those rights are being violated and our community is terrified. How is the Kansas City Police Department and ICE collaboration that we recently saw supposed to help us feel safe when we can't trust that anymore? I know, sorry, tough question.
No. It's not a tough question. It's just a tough issue that's going on right now. We want to be able to say that that those who are victims of a crime or witness to a crime should be able to feel comfortable reporting a crime regardless of immigration status. And I was present in January of 2018 when the chief of police said, hey, the police, we're not going to involve ourselves in arrest based on immigration status. We're not even going to ask about immigration status. We're not going to turn people over to ICE. And so we all have eyes and ears. And so we've seen on the news, we've seen the Facebook video where all it took was a phone call from ICE, not because there was somebody trying to flee or somebody who was dangerous or erratic, but somebody was exercising their Fourth Amendment right to not be arrested without a warrant, which is what we teach in Know Your Rights trainings. And so unfortunately, about Know Your Rights, I don't feel that we're teaching wrongly. If the police who attempted to break that window and ICE who ultimately did break that window, if they had the right to do it, we would have to say, hey, because somebody either has past record with immigration, or hey, because somebody's in their vehicle, they are not protected from such things happening. But unfortunately, I think our Know Your Rights training is sound, but when those rights are violated, that sends shockwaves. And this case made news internationally. Even London covered what was happening in Kansas City. And they don't cover things that happen in Kansas City because it's just everyday common occurrence that somebody gets arrested by ICE, because people do get arrested by ICE every day. Something different happened in Kansas City. Something different that violated somebody's constitutionally protected rights. And yes, undocumented immigrants have Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment constitutional rights. And so the question then becomes, what do we do about it? I would assume many of us that are in this room are not undocumented, but there are many people outside of this room who are living in fear, that don't want to send their kids to school, that don't want to leave their homes after dark, don't want to interact with the police. And so right now we do have a big problem in our community. The nation is looking at us right now because what happened here, if it gets unchecked, unresolved, and this becomes a precedent for other cases to happen just like what happened here, the whole country is looking at Kansas City and wanting to know, what are we going to do about this? Because if it can happen here, it can happen there. And my fear is that if they say either undocumented immigrants don't have rights, don't have Fourth Amendment rights to not be arrested without a warrant, if they can do it to your car today and it gets unchecked and unchallenged, that what are they going to do next? And I don't like to be a slippery slope kind of person, but the question for them is not what is constitutional. The question for them is what can they get away with?
Thank you, Raymond. Anybody else? Jennifer?
I mean, I would just say that with this specific incident, I know the ACLU at least is attempting to speak with the police department about it, and there has been so much community uproar and support for the family that was affected that hopefully something will be done. I don't know if that officer will be suspended, lose his job, or if they will retrain people, or what will be done, but hopefully something will be done. So it's really ugly, but the community has really risen up to try to address the issue. So hopefully, I mean, there is hope, at least.
I was not going to say anything, but I would say we need to keep them accountable. What makes them, if anything goes, if this just go over, where months, weeks pass by, and this happens again, how are we going to keep them accountable? ICE is a very hard agency to keep accountable. So we, the community members, our allies, we need to make sure we're there in the front line for our community members. Calling the chief, hey, this is not, what are you going to do about this? Accountability needs to be back. And I'm so sorry, but my community has a lot on their hands right now, a lot of stress that I can be activating my community to go out. That's when we need help, and we need the allies. We need to stand up. If it's fine, do a petition, but also keep calling, keep pressuring them. What are you going to do? This is our members and our communities that are affected. We are the front lines, and we need to be more active to keep them accountable.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to switch a little bit here. We've got a couple of questions regarding our youth and our students. So, students are going back to school now, and we have a lot of youth who have applied for DACA or who are DACA recipients. There are a couple of questions around what's the latest status of DACA? Where is it headed? Any updates you can give us on that? And regarding that, DACA doesn't necessarily is not a license to drive, right? A driver's license. So what if a young person who is under 18 who is caught driving without a license, or if a family member is deported, and this is a little more complex, what happens to that underage student? So I guess one, updates on DACA, and two, for students who are under the age of 18, what happens if they don't have, if a family member gets held, deported, and in detention? Anything you could share on that?
We're doing renewals, full force, renewals. KS Moda, El Centro, we do renewals every month for free. If you qualify under our requirements, we're doing for free. And we have volunteer attorneys, so please, if you know anybody that needs to renew, send them over to Sofia and KS Moda or El Centro. But we want to make sure we have that opportunity. We're still doing them. That's my plug on renewal.
And on that note, like really, if you know a student or a client who needs to renew or is going to whose DACA is going to expire soon, push them really hard to go see El Centro, KS Moda, or their attorney immediately, because one way to get placed in removal proceedings is if you end up falling out of status. If your DACA expires and you do get a driver's license when you have DACA because you get a work card. With that work card and you get a social. With the work card and a social, you can get a driver's license. But once your DACA expires, so does your license. And so if you get caught driving while brown, for example, they pull you over because sometimes, the police in Belton and in Platte seem to be, they have ESP, and so they know when someone is driving without a license just by looking at them. And so when that happens, then the person falls to ICE. And then they get put in removal proceedings. And once they get their DACA renewed, even if they renew it once they're in proceedings, you can still renew it even if it's expired, but as long as it's been within a year. But once it's renewed, the judges are not willing to terminate the removal cases. And the government attorneys, guess what? They're saying, oh, we're not going to agree to terminate the case. We're not going to ask the judge for that. And then the judge gets stuck because they're no longer allowed to administratively close cases because Jeff Sessions ran around and made a bunch of new laws that said we can't do this anymore. So we have DACA kids who are stuck at getting orders of removal. And they're saying, oh, no big deal because they won't get deported. We can't actually execute the order of deportation as long as they have DACA. But yeah, what happens when it expires again, or when DACA potentially gets taken away, depending on what the U.S. Supreme Court does with it, because they are going to address the legality of DACA soon. So Anybody you know who has DACA, encourage them to stay on top of things and renew 6 months before it expires. That's what I'll say.
I'm gonna say, and if it's financial, that have financial problems, you as the community advocate, reach out to organizations, make that happen. That should never, ever, ever be a barrier. There's help out there.
I hope the person who wrote that question is still in the room. It sounds like there might be a little bit more specifics to that question, and feel free to talk to either Ginevra or I after the panel today. And I charge 25 cents per question. I'm not sure what Ginevra's rates are, but we should have a decision on DACA by the U.S. Supreme Court, likely in June of 2020. They have the power to make a decision as to whether the program continues. They have the power to end DACA for everybody who has it. With a ruling, likely, my belief is if they do rule that DACA is unconstitutional or didn't follow the proper procedures to enact it, or that the Trump administration has the power to end it, my suspicion is that they'll do a rolling cancellation, that if you have it, when the decision is made, you will not be able to renew it. And again, we do need Congress to step in to create a lasting solution for those with DACA and beyond.
Thank you. So I know we're running up on time. We have a few more questions that I'm going to ask, just kind of quick fire here for you all. But before we finish, again, I just want to make sure to thank everybody, and then I'm going to ask for closing thoughts from the panelists. So while I'm giving some thank yous, you may want to think about what you're going to say. And also remind you to please fill out, if you haven't signed in, please, if you would like to sign in with your email, we're going to be sending out information that will be sent out, specifically some of the resources that were talked about tonight on tonight's panel. So if you'd like to receive information, please make sure you sign in with your name and email or any other information you'd like to give. There is an evaluation form in your program, so please fill that out if you can before you leave. We'll also email that out if you can't fill that out tonight, but please try to fill that out before you leave. It helps for future events and information that we're trying to spread. So a couple of quick questions. They seem like yes or no questions, but for an attorney, they're never yes or no questions. I know this. But so 3 questions regarding ICE specifically. I'll just ask them all. Do ICE officers have to identify themselves when they enter a school or a business? Well, I'll start with that. Do they have to identify? Does ICE have to identify themselves when they enter a school, business, or anywhere that they show up?
No. I mean, they do trainings. We law enforcement, they can be as sneaky as they want to be, and many operate on a daily basis in plain clothes. They're not wearing something that says ICE across their chest or across their back. We're seeing more and more ICE agents in plain clothes outside of courthouses, and unfortunately, what we're seeing is that the court clerks' offices are working hand in hand with ICE. They're calling and they're saying, hey, so-and-so is having a traffic hearing today. If you're looking for this person, or if you're interested in talking to this person, you might want to come by the courthouse. And so we are seeing that in apartment complexes. Not in this area, but we're seeing, maybe it's happening in this area, I just haven't heard of it. But they're saying, hey, we're looking for this person, and we want to make sure that they're not in your apartment complex. And so people let them in, and then they go and make the arrest of somebody within the apartment complex that they're actually looking for. So they do a lot of ruses. They do a lot of intimidation tactics as well. That was the case with the gentleman that was wrongfully arrested on July 22nd. They called in the police as an added muscle, as a force multiplier, as de facto ICE agents. That's what the KCPD became that day. So we won't go back there, but yes, they can be sneaky, and when they're looking for somebody, they're going to try to do everything within their abilities to get that person.
Thank you. So a couple of just really quick questions to follow up. Can states refuse to contract with or work with ICE? And does ICE have the legal authority to conduct raids, arrests in Missouri and or Kansas? Does ICE have the legal authority to conduct raids and arrests in Missouri and or Kansas? And can states refuse to contract or work with ICE?
Yes and yes. I mean, usually the way it works is a specific city will refuse to cooperate with ICE. I don't know that there, I mean, maybe California, but there really probably aren't many states as a whole who refuse to work with ICE. It's often a city-by-city thing, and then that's where you hear Trump running around yelling about sanctuary cities, we're going to cut off funding, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of the legal authority to conduct raids, yes, they do have the legal authority. Where it gets kind of employers to hand over private, employee files, for example, by saying, well, if you don't do this, then we're going to audit you, and we're going to hold the employer accountable for hiring all these people who don't have status. I mean, technically they can do that. It's not fair, but they do. But yes, I mean, they can. I don't know that there are a lot of places here in town that they would raid necessarily. If we're talking about worksite raids, they'd probably focus more on the towns that have large, like, meatpacking plants and things like that. So I know maybe St. Joe or like Dodge City or some places out in middle Missouri, maybe the likelier targets.
Raids have happened in this area. A wood framing agency in Olathe was raided. A nightclub in Kansas City, not years ago, was raided in Kansas City. They are within their realm of enforcement to conduct raids in this area, but usually they need the cooperation of the local law enforcement agencies in order to conduct a big operation, because there are ICE agents in the Kansas City area, but what happened in Mississippi was over 600 ICE agents, and so usually if they're going to conduct a raid, it's a long-term planning operation, and brace yourselves. Who knows who's next? Let's hope it's not here in Kansas City, but why not Kansas City? There's nothing saying that it can't happen here.
Thank you. So I've been given the signal in the back to stop. So while you guys are, I'm going to ask for closing remarks from our panelists. Let's give our panelists a round of applause before we finish up, please. Again, I know this is a ton of information, and I apologize to those that wrote a question that maybe we didn't get to specifically tonight. Maybe there might be a way where we can send those to our panelists, and maybe they can offer a written response, although I know our immigration attorneys may not want to write their answers in paper, and they're not binding, right, if you write them down? Okay. So maybe we can get your specific questions to our panelists, and they might be able to respond to you. There's a lot to unpack tonight. There's a lot of information that we heard tonight, and again, this is just a starting point to get some information, so we hope that you follow up and continue to do some research on this work. And this isn't the end. There's more to come. As Nubia and folks said, there's a ton of other resources in our area. KS Moda, Air, El Centro put on Know Your Rights information, workshops, and DACA clinics all the time. So please make sure you visit their organizations, their websites, and sign up for information. We also have the Mexican consulate here with us tonight. The head consul is here with us tonight. If you'd like to speak with him directly, you can please visit their table and have an opportunity to speak with him as well. But again, we want to thank all of our panelists, and I'm going to ask for closing thoughts. I'm just going to, a selfless plug here. I want to, again, just thank all of you for being here. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here and taking this information back to your own schools, your businesses, your organizations, your community. Together, we've got to work together to advocate for and lift up one another. So thank you for that. I'll just put in a plug here. I am running for school board in KCK. You can find more information on randylopez.org. I know, sorry. But go to randylopez.org and you can find some more information on that. Closing thoughts from our panelists. Anything you want to leave us with tonight? All
right. Well, thank you for coming, everybody. It was there's a lot of things to discuss when it comes to immigration. We can have entire panels on public charge. We can have entire panels on DACA, what's going to happen with DACA. We can have entire panels on what's going to be happening with Know Your Rights in this area. But I had fun. Hopefully, I was very dark today. I'm actually a nice guy, so come talk to me after the panel.
I second that. He is a very nice guy, so don't be scared. I think for me, yes, to thank you guys for being here, because that's part of the major thing that I would recommend is that we keep up to date with accurate information, because it's changing very rapidly, and I know it's hard. But again, and I know I mentioned this early, but making sure that we are connected with the reputable individuals that are giving sound advice, because just because we see somebody on ads or on TV that they've paid lots of money to be on there, that does not mean that they are the reputable individuals. So please, please, this is a great network to get information about who are good resources to refer your clients and families to. I would also say that make sure that when you're going back to your organizations that you really talk about what is the plan that you all have, making sure that you're using specific wording on what are the frontline workers supposed to say if and when something like this would happen. Making sure that they're aware of all the different tactics that ICE and others can use. So just by the fear of showing a badge, that then could trigger us to want to give any and all information, but giving them wording or designating an individual that those agents would have to talk to, and making sure that that designated individual knows the difference between an official warrant, because that's going to be an important piece too. So, and I could go on and on, but I will pass it over.
Thanks. Again, thank you all for being here. And one thing I would say is, if you don't like what's happening, we don't, for sure. Please vote. Please vote. And take other people with you. Make them all vote, because that's really the best way that we're going to make some changes around here, because it starts locally, but we really need to get these people out of office if we want to make national changes that will then trickle down to the rest of the country. Just please vote. That's all.
Same. Muchas gracias.
Oh,
Muchas
wait.
gracias.
Don't vote if you're not a citizen, though, because you'll get deported for it.
That's true. Muchas gracias. Thank you, everybody, for being here again. You don't know how much this means to me to see so many people here getting that information and taking it back to our communities. I also want to say, please, you're not alone. Reach out to us. Reach out to Andrea. I might not have all the answers, surprise, but I will reach out. I will get you the answers. I will connect you to the resources. The thing about me is I ask to find an answer to be able to help us. So don't feel like you're alone. Reach out. If you don't hear from me, email me again. The second time I'll get it. But yes, you're not alone. A lot of us have our social media where we're active, so follow us there. I don't have my card, but follow us on social media. Email us. Send us a message. Did you want to say something?
I just could say there's these resources.
Yes. Please take all these resources, the yellow cards. It has information in English to be able to give to the authorities or whoever is there. And in the back, it has a little bit about knowing your rights and what you could do in a situation where you need to use them. So yellow cards, take them. Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists for all the information, for everything that you do in our community. And thank you to all of you for your time tonight. And they may hang around for a little bit, so if you want to speak with them, come on up. But again, thank you guys so much for tonight.